Chat Live. I am Tara Clapper, and I am the founder of the Geek Initiative as well as the publisher. We are doing a bunch of stuff now over at TGI. In addition to all the content that we produce in terms of the articles and the blog posts and live tweeting TV shows and all that fun stuff, we are now also publishing some stories. We're publishing some books, which will be great for 2018. We're publishing LARPs, and of course, we're always immersed in the LARPs that other people are creating, which brings us here today to LARP Chat Live, where we are going to discuss Armistice Arcane, which I am going to, and I'm so excited about it. Can't wait. We're going to get into the details of the aesthetic of this game, which is part of what makes it kind of different from any other game out there, as well as the costuming, resources and challenges that we've been facing, and the playstyle, the plot, and the gorgeous setting, which is in New Orleans in the French Quarter, one of my favorite places in the world. So, cannot wait for this game. And I am joined tonight by Kathy, and welcome, Kathy. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
I would love to hear a little bit more about the aesthetic of the game and just kind of the game principles and basically how you would describe Armistice Arcane to our audience who hopefully will be interested in attending and hearing all about it.
Sounds great.
All right, so if you are watching here on Twitch live and you're not watching the recorded version here, you can go ahead and interact, ask questions. I'm going to be monitoring the chat as we go here, so I might take a minute to get to your question, but I am definitely watching. I see we do have a couple viewers. Thank you so much for joining in. So feel free to chat amongst yourselves, drop a comment, drop a question you have, and we'll go ahead and address that kind of as we go on. So I would love to ask you, Kathy, first about the idea for Armistice Arcane, as well as the team that you're working with. How did it come to be?
Well, the team that I'm working with has been together putting on LARPs for about a decade now. And we started off as a smaller team doing invite-only games of about 40 to 50 people at a time. We would rent a giant lake house, and everybody would come for the weekend, and we would do a game over the course of the weekend. And as time went on, we began to realize that the things we loved about our LARPs had nothing to do with mechanics or with sheets or with combat or anything like that. The stuff that we loved was the story of it. And so we started getting rid of all that other stuff and kept providing sort of these rich, detailed character histories and motivations and webs, and then people would come and they would basically be in these other people for a weekend doing things. And then we started to realize that what we were doing was similar to something out there that had been going on for a long time called Nordic LARPing. And we realized, oh, hey, we didn't even know that's what we were doing. It's just what we were doing. And so we started doing a lot of research into Nordic LARPing and sort of romantic style LARPing and historical LARPing and all of these different styles that were out there. And this past year, the game that we ran was Armistice Arcane. And, we ran it for about 50 people, and it was one of our most successful games. We just decided it was a really good game to take larger. And as you know, I was at Dragon Thrones over the summer, and our team did the writing for Dragon Thrones, and when we went and saw sort of what was possible in the U.S., we decided that it was probably time to go ahead and see if there was a place for what we were trying to do in the grander scheme of things, whether there was a market, whether or not there were enough people interested. So we looked at all of the games that we had run previously and decided that of all of them, Armistice Arcane was the easiest one to adapt to a larger audience. So we took that, we did some reconfiguring of it, and we went forward. And a lot of the aesthetic of this game comes from a series of places. Obviously, the primary source is Penny Dreadful. We all adore Penny Dreadful, except for that one team member, Corey, who just can't seem to get it together enough to actually finish the series, even though we've given him the homework multiple times to do so. Hi, Corey, I love you. And so Penny Dreadful was the main one, but there were also some literary inspirations. The novel The Night Circus was a big one for us. We were also inspired a little bit by the HBO series Carnival, which was sort of the opening of Armistice Arcane for us, was this image of a carnival that we placed into the Victorian era. So all of those things just kind of came together and became Armistice Arcane, which we then took and spread outward and increased and made larger.
So everybody in the chat, we're all kind of talking about the different factions. And I have to say, when I first looked over your game, I mean, I was already sold on your writing ability, because I played a character that your team wrote at Dragon Thrones, so I was already kind of sold on that, and I was like, I'll play anything you do, right? But once I saw not only the setting, which is a little different than anything anyone's quite doing in the US on a big scale, the second thing that really sold me on it was the factions. And it's just so different, because so many of someone with a background in fantasy role-playing, so many of the factions that we're used to getting in the US are like, okay, you have like your elves and your dwarves, and, you know, or you have like your analog for Celts, which is like what I always end up playing, and I'm still kind of playing, but in such a different context in this game, which is so cool. It's like completely changed the way I think about playing this type of character. So tell me a little bit about how you chose the different factions, and how you chose the number of factions that you decided to include.
When we first started, we wanted to have, one of the things we looked at were the actual sort of old-fashioned Penny Dreadful books. And we looked at what are the kinds of stories that these Penny Dreadfuls were telling, and how did they go from being sort of these, you know, dime store novels of horror to something bigger, like, you know, say the Gothic Dracula or Frankenstein or Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. We decided that we wanted to find what were the core concepts of characters in these kinds of novels and in these kinds of stories. And we decided, well, you know, you have the Frankenstein story, which means you've got sort of the academics and the mad scientists. Mm-hmm. And then you've got the, you know, if you go to Penny Dreadful, the TV show, then you've got sort of the adventurers, like in that show was Malcolm, and, you know, so you have this club that is people who have done adventuring, and then you've got the high society folks who, in the real Victorian era, you know, this was where the so-called occultism was going on with the seances and the drawing room stuff, and of course, you know, that original idea of the circus was still there. So we sort of put all these together and decided that if you've got all these magic users, a group out there that's hunting all of them. So we came up with the Sentinels, which is kind of our hunter group that's there. And those were the 5 that we had when we first ran this game. Mm-hmm. When we decided that we wanted to extend it, we realized that we would need more. So we created 3 others. One of them is the Order, which you're a part of, and then the Beacon Hill Players, which is a theater troupe based out of Boston. And then the, why am I forgetting? Hold on just a second. Hey, Mark, what's that third group? The Eclipse, right. Those are the ones that have managed to be affected by supernatural events that were beyond their control and would normally be hunted by the hunters, except that they've banded together to sort of hide in the shadows. So they are Frankenstein's monster hiding from the public. And so those are the different factions that we came up with, sort of based around these core concepts, but not necessarily cliche. I mean, you're going to have a little bit of homage. So you will have some concepts that are going to be very familiar to anybody who's done any kind of Gothic or Victorian era stuff, but all with their own and deeper spins than just the concept itself.
Awesome, because I haven't heard anything, that's really kind of gotten that combination of groups in the same way, and it's my favorite thing about the game. I'm gonna switch over to everyone's comments here because we do have a couple questions, and the chat is so lively. Thank you, everyone who's participating. Strange Haven asks, how many players can the game hold, and how many have signed up?
We have 100. We have room for 100, plus our 9 GMs are playing as sort of half character, half GMs. So we have a total of 109, and right now we have a little over 70 players cast. So we have about another 30 to 35 tickets we can sell.
Awesome. And I have another comment here from Cool Cali Guy. Since Dragon Thrones was my first 3-day LARP, having done shorter ones before, it was absolutely immersive and amazing. Since Armistice Arcane might be other first weekend LARPs, please be sure to share how welcoming us LARPers are to new players. All are welcome. And I want to echo that, and also I'd like to ask what new players in particular can expect if they sign up for your game, especially if they haven't played any LARP before at all, or if they haven't played any LARP in this particular style.
Well, one of the things that is really important to us is to ensure that the LARP community at large grows, because the only way to keep opportunities in this country is to make them open to as many people as possible. So we are incredibly new person friendly. We make sure at the very beginning of the game you'll get a workshop that'll kind of take you through all of the different kinds of things that you need to know about the game, the consent mechanics that we're going to be using, the what exactly is going to be going on in the game, and how to basically play in a LARP. And we're also going to have an out-of-character room that's going to be staffed by medical health professionals. So if somebody needs to sort of pull out of the game for a little while, if things get a little too intense, there is going to be a place where they can go, a place they can relax. So it's even for people who are not used to it, who are getting used to it, there are going to be measures in place to make sure that they are comfortable for the entirety of the weekend. One of the other things that is nice about what we're doing in the location we have is that if anybody really feels like they just need to get away for a minute, it's all in the same location. So they can, take some time, go to their room, wash their face, whatever, just, sit for 20 minutes, and it's all okay. So we are all, we were all new LARPers once, and we all remember what that was like, and that nervousness and being afraid. So one of the other things we've done is we've tried to make sure that every faction in play has 2 or 3 really experienced, but also really nice LARPers, so that everybody there who's going to make them feel more comfortable. This is why our GMs are actually going to be part of the game, so that even if somebody feels like, I don't know what to do next, there will be somebody there to help them out.
Yes, and we have some great chat going on. Somebody asked for tips for playing in this LARP style for the first time, and we're just getting some really fantastic, helpful community members already jumping in and telling them exactly what they should. So that's fantastic. And I would just like to add, my big thing is, you want to respect your storytellers, respect the GMs, and stay in the game, but don't be so paranoid about, doing something game-breaking or taking the spotlight as long as you're not in the spotlight 100% of the time. If you have a moment, and that moment is this was meant for me, take it, do it, do the thing. So, I know for my character, I haven't even, we don't even have our, full sheets yet, but I'm, already kind of thinking, I have a really good idea of, a ritual kind of thing she could do, and I know I'm not the only one. Everybody's really doing that. Let's see. Weird Dundee asks, what do I need to bring?
Well, what you need to bring is, in terms of physical objects you need to bring. It would be costuming first. That is your primary thing, is that whatever costuming you want to wear for your character should be part of it. If you have any kind of paraphernalia that you want to have, if you're playing an upscale Victorian gentleman and you want to bring a cane, or you want to bring, your favorite wine goblet, or, you're a lady and you want to bring a fan or a parasol, or, you're a healer and you want to bring vials with you. I mean, all of those things are great. Anything that can be sort of a physical representation of something you might do would be fine. We're trying as much as possible to make this what you see is what you get. It's a little hard with magic. I mean, anybody who's done any kind of LARPing with magic, that can be difficult. But we have plans to incorporate anything that people want to bring that might represent, like vials or whatever. Mm-hmm. Other than that, really everything is taken care of. We take care of your food. We take care of where you're sleeping. We make sure that, you can get from point A to point B once you're at the hotel. And we have snacks for you. We have, I say we have some swag, but it's actually pretty high quality stuff that we're giving out to our people. So, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that we take care of. We want this to be, where you get there and then don't have to worry about anything else.
It's my favorite kind of LARP. That's great. And on a related question, Cool Cali guy, I saw your question. It's really good. I'm going to get to that in just a second. But Pokemaster 10 asks, will any rituals that happen in character require players to bring all things necessary? Asking because international imports can be very squiffy. And of course, Kathy, I'll let you answer that officially. But I'll just say, for what I'm planning, I intentionally am trying to make it so that I personally didn't have to buy more props because I'm flying in, and also because my budget's really small right now. So I kind of came up with something where I bring a prop that I already own, and my character is going to ask those who participate to say, do, or kind of put into the pile something personal to them. So, as an example for a ritual that I would write as a player, I would say, okay, I'm going to pass out some paper and, and pencils. Go ahead and write down X, Y, and Z. I don't want to give it away, but go ahead and write down X, Y, and Z, place it in the circle, and, and then so on and so forth. So that's a great example of a ritual that you could do where you're not bringing a ton of stuff. It's pencils, paper, and then I have some tarot cards that I'm bringing. So I definitely understand. I'm not traveling from very far, but I'm doing the plane thing. So I completely understand those restrictions. Kathy, did you have anything to add to that about what we're supposed to bring?
As far as rituals go, we are trying to make sure that all of the stuff that you might need is already there. A lot of, when you think about magic for this game, one of the things that you want to think about is, you're not going to be able to set someone on fire, obviously. But because everything is negotiated in-game and everything is worked out between players, I can easily say to you, instead of, I want to, set you on fire, which we're hoping nobody wants to do that. But if somebody did want to, instead of setting them on fire, they would negotiate out, well, you feel like you're burning from the inside. Mm-hmm. So instead of having magic be something that is big and showy, magic is something that you either have to spend time doing, sitting, doing a ritual, working together with each other, or it's something that creates a sensation or a feeling rather than creating a showy thing. So there will be ritual paraphernalia there. Nobody needs to bring any of that stuff, but if you wanted to, you could, and we would find a way to incorporate it. As well, everybody is going to have their characters, their full character backgrounds with, information about their magic and their motivations and all of that. By next Friday, so less than a week.
That's so exciting.
And that means that they'll still have a month in which they can work with the other people in their factions and maybe they come up with a really amazing ritual they want to do, and they, if somebody has to fly in but somebody else is driving, they might say, hey, would you bring this stuff? And that way we don't have to. So there'll be a lot of time for people to kind of work on that and figure that out before the game.
Exactly. I know, like, some of my ritual stuff, my costume pieces, advices I've gotten on costuming, and costuming's a whole other thing that we'll get to in a minute. But, a lot of that has been pieced together just by talking to you and to other players, because I'm like, how am I going to do this? There's a way to make it happen. We have one practical question from Cool Cali Guy, and then I want to jump to a couple other topics on the agenda, such as we talked a little bit about scene negotiation and consent. That's a really big, important thing. And costuming is like the big topic discussion as well, because it's, certainly not an era that a lot of people have, like, just laying around in the costume closet. So we'll talk about that too. But the practical question we have is, what does the agenda look like for now? Like start time, like what's the schedule like on the second day, and when does it end?
Okay, on the first day, the plan is to start the workshop at around 1 o'clock on Friday, and then about 4 o'clock, we'll stop, let people go get dressed, let them get ready, and then they'll come down to dinner, and dinner begins the in-character time. So it'll run until about midnight or so, and then we're looking at having sort of a special kind of event for anybody who wants to stay up really late after midnight, but it's not anything that's required. So, maybe something nighttime for people who, never sleep in a LARP, and I know there are some of them. Lauren, I'm looking at you. And so we'll have something there around midnight, and then the next day, people will get up, and when they come to breakfast, it will be in character. So from breakfast time until, basically midnight, as long as people are in the gaming space, they'll be in character. Now, people are going to want to change for the ball Saturday night, because there is a ball, and so there'll probably be about an hour or so where there's downtime so that people can go get dressed. But during the day, we have a number of things planned. Saturday morning, late morning, we're going to do some dance instruction for people so that they can learn sort of some basic waltzing and some basic Victorian dancing for the ball that night. And that is going to be in character, because we actually have people coming who are really, really good at this and are also playing characters. So they will, in character, teach people how to do some of these dances for that night. We have a string quartet coming. I'm so excited about the ball. It's going to be amazing. And we also have, and this was an idea that we got from Dragon Thrones that we really, really liked, we're also going to have an escape room kind of thing going on at various times throughout the day that people can go to. Only instead of thinking of it as an escape room, you might think of it almost like a giant puzzle box, in that this is where, you can't really have magic without having some kind of problems to solve. So all of those problems will sort of be in this puzzle room where people can go in, and if they can solve everything, then they will get stuff that is relevant to what they're trying to do in the course of the game. And so we have that, and it's not required. You might want to send 2 or 3 people from every faction to go do it, or an entire faction may say, like the Institute, for example, they're all academics and scientists, and they may say, we're all going to go do this. However people want to do it, it's there for the taking. So we're going to do that, and we're going to run up right until about midnight on that night, and then there's going to be basically an after party where we all kind of hang out and talk, and people who were enemies in-game can come together and talk and laugh and tell stories. This is one of my favorite parts of every LARP I've ever been to, is kind of that after party moment. And then the next day at about 11, we'll all meet after breakfast and then have a debrief that should go for a couple of hours, and we'll be done by about 1 o'clock.
Fantastic. So just going to take care of some housekeeping things. So Glasswalker 7, I know you're trying to be helpful, and you're trying to post relevant links to the conversation. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to temporarily moderate allow you to be a mod, so you'll be able to post links, which will also help us out greatly. So just one second, I'm gonna.
He is one of our staff, so.
Yes, let's enable your staff to actually post things. There we go. So hopefully that works. Great. So Glasswalker7, you're a moderator, so now you can post links without repercussions. And also, if anybody comes in and starts being a jerk, you are more than welcome to kick them out by just kicking the little thing next to their name. So thank you. That is a big help. We had another question kind of related to that, and then we've got to move on to consent and scene negotiation because it's so huge about this play style. But Hoyten Fenn asks, can you speak about the difference between historical fantasy LARP and historical recreation, and where Armistice Arcane falls on the spectrum and its impact on costuming? Which I know I personally have struggled with that a lot, right? Because we've talked about this, because I'm on a limited budget. Fortunately,
Right.
my character does come from, like, sort of ish the same background as some of my fantasy characters, so I've got a few things that can work, but I've got a lot of things that can't work because it's just the different, like, corset shape is totally different. Like, the shape of a fantasy bodice is not exactly what, one would wear in this era. So, where is the line? How can you tell the difference? And where can you go for guidance on that kind of stuff?
That's a really good question, and it's one that a lot of people have actually had. We like to say that we are historically adjacent. We are not strict historical. So basically what we're looking for is Victorian thematics as opposed to strict Victorian recreation. So if people have, costuming that's say 20 or 30, years before or 10 to 20 years after, it's going to be fine. So if you have, that dress that you wore for Fairweather Manor and you really, really love it, you can probably bring it in and it will probably be fine. What we're looking for is this feel rather than this specific look. And we are also history adjacent in that we are not denying any history that has occurred in the real world, but in the magic worlds, things that are important are things like magical ability and aptitude and talent and skill and ability to work with other magicians rather than, say, your gender or your skin color or your ethnicity. So even though we still are definitely, looking at these things happen historically, they're not going to play a role in how people get their characters or how they become who they are. We've set it just far enough after the Civil War that most of our characters won't have dealt with that except for as a child. There are a few exceptions, and that's very carefully written into the backgrounds because we're very sensitive to that. I am a professor, and my specialty is actually Southern culture and Southern literature. So one of the things that's really important to me is making sure that things are done with sensitivity for everybody. One of the questions that somebody had was whether or not there would be, say, any Confederate iconography. And the answer is no, of course not. That's just ridiculous. We wouldn't do that. So when we say historical adjacent, that's kind of what we mean, is that we are looking at a very different community than the community that existed. And at the same time, we can say the same thing about costuming. I mean, the Institute, for example, has that little bit of steampunk going on with it. And the Sentinels might have a little bit of that Old West feel going on for it as well. So there's a little bit of wiggle room in all of those factions.
Fantastic. Sorry, I'm just kind of multitasking here, doing the chat thing and handling some specific cues. Cool Cali Guy asks, can you share more about how people are cast and characters selected? And I have to say, I really like your character questionnaire and also your casting process. Just to kind of tell you what it was like from my perspective. there were only, I think, like 7 or 8 questions, and some of them were really simple, like, what are your pronouns? Like, super simple answer, that kind of stuff. What is your preference in terms of which faction you get cast into? Stuff like that. But other questions, you could do a short answer or you could do a long answer. And I kind of like put a whole list at the end of mine. I was like, here are some ideas I have and some themes. And then I get my blurb and I'm like, they included all of them. Wow, that's really awesome. So, so awesome. Like, really, really, I thought it was a really great job on the character questionnaire because it wasn't overwhelming, but if you wanted to add other stuff in, you totally could. So from the perspective, I guess, of the writing and design team, how does that work? You send out the initial survey, right? And then they get it back, then you get a blurb, and then you get your full character later?
Well, that is the sort of the process of it, but there's actually more to it in that we are personally speaking with everybody a little bit at least to talk about, would you feel comfortable in this kind of a position? Would you feel comfortable in that kind of a position? And when you sign up through the website, there are a series of questions that it asks that are different than the questions we ask when we send out the character casting survey. And so if you filled out both of them, we take both of those into account. At this point, because of how late it is and how close the game is, we are actually talking to people before we send out the survey so that we can get a sense of where they might be most comfortable, especially in comparison to the characters that we still need to cast. So there are about 10 characters still that we would really, really like to fill. And so we've been talking to people as they come in with, here are some options of what we still have left. What would you like to do there? We also try to take into account people's experience levels. We don't want to throw somebody into the deep end if they're still just trying to get their feet wet a little bit. But we've had some people who said this was their first LARP ever, and they're just, they're like,
go for it. Let's do it. Nice.
Jump right out the gate and, lead giant factions or whatever. So we're sort of trying to find a good balance of where we're putting people. And we would also kind of like to have mostly equal factions. I mean, some of them are by nature going to be smaller than others, but we would kind of like to fill them out so they are mostly even. So I think that, all of that, as well, we've tried to work with people's, it's Victorian, and that means that there's going to be a lot of sort of romantic sub-stories. And so we've worked with people to ask them, are you interested in a romantic sub-story? And if you are, what gender would you like to have that story with? So that we're not forcing people into positions that's going to make them uncomfortable in game. But we're also trying, for the most part, if there is a definitive romantic story, to clear that with them ahead of time. To basically say, hey, is this okay? And if we don't clear it ahead of time, then what they have is an option. Like you may get a character sheet that says, you are torn between X and Y, and that gives you the option of, do I want to follow either of these? As well, our characters have a lot of freedom because once we write the characters and give them out, they're not our characters anymore. And so, and we like that.
And it's so reassuring as a player to hear that because it's like, well, this is really nice, but I want to add and change it, and I'm like adding costume details and writing rituals already. And while we're talking about the characters and romance, that's actually a great segue. As a player who loves having characters who are involved in romance and all sorts of intrigue, it's a great segue into the concept of emotional safety and consent and scene negotiation. So could you tell us a little bit about, first of all, what is emotional safety and why is that important in this kind of LARP? And secondly, how is that handled? Like, how do you get consent from somebody properly, and how do you negotiate scenes?
So we made the conscious decision to wait on determining which consent mechanisms we were going to use until we knew who all of our characters were, or who all of our players were, because we wanted to make sure that what we chose to do would be appropriate for the players who were coming to our game. So we have a handful that we are looking at in terms of specifics, like are we going to use cut, are we going to use break, are we going to use look down? I mean, what are the things that we want to use? And we haven't yet answered specifically which words we're going to use or which particular motions we're going to use. That's still something my team is working on, but we have decided that the things that are important to us are that people be able to walk away from a scene, no questions asked, if it is going in a direction that makes them uncomfortable, with no repercussions, that players be able to de-escalate a situation. So if something is happening and the players, if someone is making romantic overtures or making violent overtures at someone, the person needs to be able to say, I'd like to de-escalate this. I'm okay with the scene continuing, but I'm not okay with the level at which it has gotten. And at the same time, players need to be able to be free to say, you know what, I'd really like this to get more intense, or even just, I'm comfortable with this getting more intense. So we want there to be mechanisms for all of that. And what we have discovered is that the more comfortable somebody feels with letting themselves go, the more they are likely to do so. If somebody is afraid that they can't get out of a scene, then they're not going to take the risks that they might normally take. So if I go up and I want to start a duel with somebody, or I want to start, flirting with somebody, I might not if I feel like, I'm going to be stuck with this scene even if it gets out of control. But if I know that I have control over how my actions in that scene go, I'm more likely to kind of let go and allow myself to be more intensely involved in the scene. So emotional safety is all about feeling secure in whatever moment you are in. Knowing that at any time you can say, this is too much for me, and I'm going to go hang out in the OC room, or I'm going to hang out, over on the other side of the room, and know that it's not going to destroy your situation as a character.
Yeah, and a related question that a few people are having. So some of us have certainly indicated we want certain romantic relationships or familial connections, stuff like that. And our blurbs may or may not have kind of hints of that as well. Everybody's curious about when do we find out who is playing that other person, and how do we connect with them? Can we find out ahead of time? And a related question, is there going to be a looking for any kind of connection, looking for character connection, or for somebody to antagonize or be my best friend, sort of Facebook group for this LARP?
Okay, so the way that our character sheets work is that you're going to get a sheet that has a background narrative, which is really long, usually about 3 pages, give or take a half a page, and in that background narrative are going to be references to some of the people that are connected to you. So, if we have one character, for example, who is married to another character, but they are separated into 2 separate factions, and so that story will be part of their background narrative. So after the background narrative, you have a list, a bunch of bullet point lists, basically. The first one is about you. And these are some things that that you should know about yourself, basically. You are secretly in love with the theater, even though the rest of your faction thinks it's ridiculous. So some things that you can play with to sort of clarify your emotional state. And then the next one is about your magic, so it talks a little bit about the kind of magic you have. Under that is your primary allies and friends. So here you have a list of usually 3 to 5 people, and these may or may not be players who were, or characters who were mentioned in your background narrative, but they may be other people in your faction, and it also tells you there who is playing those characters. So it'll have the character name, the player's name, and then like a couple of sentences about your relationship with that character. So it might say, you were best friends growing up, although you haven't spoken to each other in over a year. You're looking forward to seeing them again. So there may be something simple like that, and then under that is your primary grudges and enemies. And these aren't necessarily people that you hate, but they're people that you may have an antagonistic relationship with. And so again, you'll have the character name, the player name, and then a couple of sentences about them. And then under that is the final sort of 2 lists. One of them is role-playing hints. So these are things you don't have to pay any attention to if you don't want to, but you can. So things like this character is probably nervous. He probably carries around a deck of cards with him in order to have something to focus on, or he may, be like a bull in a china shop and just butt into conversation. Just basically some things to guide people into that role play. And then the final thing is a list of everybody else who's in your faction, who plays those characters, and a little bit about them that everybody in the faction would know. So all of that stuff you will get in about a week's time, and if you sign up after that week, you'll get them relatively soon after you sign up. And then every faction has a Facebook group. So you can get on that Facebook group, introduce yourself, get to know other players, and if you have connections that are not in your Facebook group, then we will make sure that you guys know each other and can talk on Facebook or talk via email or however you want to do it.
Fantastic. A couple more character-specific questions. Will it be clear if our antagonists know that we're antagonistic towards them?
It'll be pretty clear, yeah.
Okay. And can you completely change your magic? And I'll kind of insert into the question any other kind of more than subtle, I guess, component of your character if it sounds boring to you?
Well, the way that we have written the characters, the kind of magic they do has a lot to do with their backgrounds. So if they were to suddenly change their magic, there would have to be some kind of explanation for why that happened. So, for example, if the kind of magic you have is that you have been able to create homunculi, for example, and you are in trouble with somebody because some homunculi you've created has been really, really bad, then to all of a sudden come in and say, well, now I have nature magic. Awkward for everybody who knows you and is part of your background. So we would prefer people didn't just come in and change it as soon as they were there. Instead, if somebody gets a character sheet and something about their character sounds like something they don't want to do, then I would prefer that they come and talk to us ahead of time so that we can work out something that will make it more interesting to them. Awesome.
So we have a lull in the questions. I get to ask more questions now. So, I mean, at this point, it sounds like you're mostly full. There are still some slots left in the game. So if somebody's interested, they can still sign up, go through the whole process, which is getting to be more exciting by the day because we're all talking about it more, and the hype is real, and everyone should totally join us. It's great. But I suppose kind of my related question for it, and this is more, I guess, from the perspective of a game designer who's like, hey, I make LARPs, I am working on a blockbuster, but, it's really hard. What was the decision to kind of really fully commit to that, because you jumped on the scene. I mean, obviously, you said you've been doing this for 10 years, but you jumped into this blockbuster scene with bam, here's Armistice Arcane, sign up. And I feel like the reaction from the community, especially from a lot of people who didn't know you already, was just whoa, what is this? Where did this come from? This is so cool. It was just so fresh, but how did you get to the point of being so committed that by the time you launched your LARP, you were just here it is, it's amazing? What was that process like?
Um, well, it was kind of a roller coaster, to be honest. When we came out of Dragon Thrones, we were feeling really hyped about what we thought we could do. And we said, we've been running these games for 50 people, and we have refined them, and we have worked on them, and we know what we're doing for a 50-person group. And we were convinced, oh yeah, we can totally easily make this 100 people, which you can tell by my tone of voice was a little more difficult than we had first thought. But once we decided this was something we wanted to do, we just said we're going to do this no matter what, and we may money this year, and we said that's fine. If that happens, it happens. What is more important to us is finding out, do we have the audience for this? Because if we do, then any money we lose this year is going to be fine because we'll make it up in future games. We were really, really lucky and really, really privileged because we have the capital to be able to do that. And if we did not have the capital to be able to do that, it is not something that would have been as easy. Sites in the United States are ridiculously expensive. I wish that I could say, I have this great castle and I want to share it with everybody, but I don't. And so we ended up having to pay a lot of money for trying to make the best game we could. And we are so excited by it that it is easier for us to stay committed to it because it's something we love so much. And we believe so strongly in the story of it that we feel like even if something else, went wrong with it, that the story is so strong that it would carry through any mistakes that happened. And the people that have signed up for this LARP and the people that have joined us are all amazing. Like I've talked to every single person involved in this game who's coming as a staff, as an NPC, as a player, and every single one of them has been amazing, and that makes it a whole lot easier to get through the, oh my gosh, we have to, sign on another 15 characters to break even, or, oh my God, we've got to, get out there and make ourselves vulnerable, which for me, in all honesty, has been the most difficult part because, I'm an academic. I'm a professor. I sit behind a desk. I don't get out there and make myself known. And so doing that, I think, has been kind of the hardest part, but in a lot of ways also the most rewarding because it's taught me the most.
Yeah, I get that. Like the sales process, because I run really small digital games, but the sales process is like terrifying to me. It's like I believe in what I do, I get great reviews, I run a sharp game, but at the end of the day, I'm like, I have a really hard time telling people, you should come play my LARP. And I'm like, how would I do that if my tickets cost like a lot more, That's got to be like huge to get over. And my question for you, because you have a lot more experience running games than I do, and I've noticed, like, I'm running 3 small games concurrently, and I've noticed that the amount of time I spend per day on answering people's questions and getting people set up and making sure everyone's happy has, like, grown and grown and grown, and I love all of my players, and they've been very patient with me, but it's a lot of time. How many hours per day at this point do you personally spend answering questions related to, costuming and things from players, and should I sign up, and hey, Kathy, will you come and LARP chat live with me, etc.? Because I know I send a lot to you as a player and as somebody who wants to, like, get more people to come to your game. How many hours per day is it coming out to be right now, just dealing with, helping people out?
It's hard to answer that because I multitask a lot. So a lot of the time when I'm at work, I'm working on projects, or I'm working on grading, or I'm working on prepping stuff, and I'm answering questions at the same time. I would say I probably spend at least 2 or 3 hours a day in conversation with other people. I don't know how that would, fall out to be, strict hours or whatever. But then there have been days where I've spent a lot more than that, and days when I've spent a lot less than that. But it is every day. I mean, every single day there's a lot to do in terms of not just talking to the players, but talking to my team and answering questions for the people who are handling our money, because I didn't want to do that. And, our marketers and dealing with everyone behind the scenes. That is also, just in terms of talking and conversations, that takes a lot of time.
Yeah, I don't think people get that when they're like in a LARP community, and it's like I certainly didn't understand it, and I'm a marketer in my as my background, but I didn't get it until I started to do it, and I'm like, now I have a lot more respect for my fellow designers, because you're writing a game, you're producing a game, you're handling customer service, you're doing marketing, you wear so many hats, and it sounds like you already work with an established team, so you're able to delegate, and that's got to be a huge part of it. And I know, like, it's kind of interesting because a lot of the things I've learned in playing leaders and kind of like the right-hand person of a leader in LARPs is how to do that, So now, like, all the skills I have to run a game I've actually learned by LARPing and delegating there too. So, yeah, I mean, we have a couple more comments in here. Just talking about how fun the research phase is and making games. We had a little bit more discussion about magic and how it works in the world, and you did mention that different factions have different types of magic. And there was a little bit of a question about how is magic known in the world? Like, do non-magical people know about it? Is it, like, illegal? Are there some types of magic that are less legal than others? How does that work?
So all of those things are sort of important to the game. The first is that it's not really known. Magic is not really known to non-magic users. Most people, if they heard there was magic, would just say, yeah, okay, whatever. Those are old wives' stories. Basically, the way our world would be today, that most people would say, well, that there's always an explanation for why that happened. So no, they're not really out there. I saw that somebody asked, is it more like Strange and Norrell, or is it more like, or Norrell, I screw up the British pronunciation, I apologize. Or is it more like World of Darkness? And in that way, it's more like World of Darkness, in that there is this veil between the magic world and the non-magic. And mostly, they try to keep those things separate. There's a little more looseness in that as soon as if I'm a character, as soon as I see that you can do it, even if you don't realize you're doing it, I'm going to bring you into the magic world. So it's not as it might be if we're trying desperately to keep other people from knowing. The answer to, are some magics more okay than others, is that yes, some of them are more okay than others. For example, one of the big no-nos in our world is mind control magic, because that is taking away a person's ability to have autonomy over themselves. And that is one of the worst things you can do. So mind control magic is absolutely no. Blood magic is pretty frowned upon.
I have a question. How about necromancy?
Necromancy is one of those gray areas, because, if you're trying to contact the dead, that might be okay. But if you're trying to raise the dead, maybe that's not so good. So all of these questions get answered. And the other thing we want is for the players themselves, for the characters, to have different answers to those questions. So some factions are going to feel very strongly about certain kinds of magic. And that's part of what's going to make this whole gathering more difficult, because all of them have their reasons for coming to this gathering to try to create some kind of armistice, some kind of agreement, to recreate an arcanum perhaps. But all of them are going to have different ideas of what should and should not be included in that, what should be allowed, what shouldn't be allowed. And so that debate over what is allowed and what isn't is going to be a major part of the political game going on.
And is that part of why our characters are there in the first place? Because we have a question about, we know the Institute is hosting, but why have our characters kind of been summoned there?
You will all have the answer to that in your characters.
Oh, awesome.
Basically every faction has a different reason for being there, and it might be, I mean, we have hinted that there are other things out there that are worse than just magic users, and people are beginning to feel like it might be good to team up to try to deal with whatever this is. What those things are in character sheets, but they also, we are getting ready to release what are called sort of the secret histories of each faction, where each faction will know what has happened to it, and through basically the last 10 or 15 years, they'll know what's been going on. So each group is going to have a different reason for coming.
Fantastic. And then I have a question about, another question about out-of-game sign-up. People are wondering, what is it like to sign up, like, for a leader package versus somebody who's not a leader, and is there, like, a price differential, and how much more power or decision-making capabilities do the leaders have versus everyone else?
All right, so we have a package that when we first started selling, we called it the leader package, but it's not really accurate to call it that, because what it is when you, and this, we did this in part because it is our first LARP, and because we needed people who would be willing to give a little more to the game so that we could afford to run it. So basically we asked people to be willing to invest a little more in us during our first game so that we could put on the best game we could. And at first we called that a leader package, but we realized that what we were actually offering was an opportunity character you wanted to play. And for most people, that was, they wanted to play a leader. So they said, well, we want to play a leader of this faction. But we had a couple of people who were willing to invest in those larger packages who didn't want to play a leader, so they're not. So a couple of our leaders are actually characters who bought a very basic package. And so the idea that you can basically get a leader if you pay more is only kind of half accurate at this point. And the leaders in this game are not like, I hate to always keep going back to Dragon Thrones, but it's something we have in common. In that game, you could pay for, say, a king. And a king would have sort of this absolute authority. And in our game, leaders aren't like that. Leaders have earned the respect of the people in their faction, but they also have antagonists. And they also have people that they, don't like or do like. And each faction has two people that are sort of at the helm of those factions, but those two people don't always get along, or maybe half the people are interested in following one person and the other half are interested in the other one. So leaders are not coming in with necessarily more power. We don't really work that way. So there isn't I have more authority, I have more power. Instead it is, these are the people who have risen to be trusted by others within their faction.
Fantastic. That sounds really awesome, really inclusive, and also kind of solves the issue of like how much investment it takes to really make a game like this kind of get off the ground. It's financially so much. So everybody's just kind of enthusiasing in chat right now, enthusing in the chat right now, saying how excited they all are, and I know I'm excited, and we're excited to get our characters, and just kind of so excited to begin. I want to put as we continue our discussion, I kind of want to put a last call out for questions, since we are kind of getting towards the end of our hour. I'd like to say that I am really excited. As soon as I got the plane ticket, I was like, it's real! I'm gonna be there! I can't wait! I can't wait to go into this kind of with an open mind, playing a character who probably doesn't have the most open mind, which is gonna be really, really fun in its own way. And I think we're just kind of all, like, the players are just kind of all at this point where we're like, we're so into the blurbs and we can't wait to get the full thing because we want to just like know like who was my character connected to, or like, hey, I get along with this person really well IRL. Are our characters going to be connected? Are we going to hate each other? And I can't wait. So we have another question here. What is your photography policy?
Okay, so we're still working on specifically what our photography policy is going to be. We are concerned with the ability to keep immersion with filming going on. So one of the things that we're clear on as a team is that we don't want constant filming going on through the whole game. That if we're going to have filming, what we'd like to do is set aside a time and a space and let our player base know, hey, we're going to be filming in this room during this time, and we really need film for, putting together our reels and making sure people next game can see it. So we'd like you to be willing to be filmed, but if you're willing, we need you to go do some role play in that room during those hours, so that then people can do filming if they want. If they want to step, they can do some filming. They can do that. On Sunday, if they want to do a lot of filming of the people that they've played with, that's fine. But as long as the game is going on in character, I would really like, if at all possible, to keep the filming to if at all.
Mm-hmm. Will there be a professional photographer?
Our plan is to have somebody there during that time to do professional photography.
Great. And great question, Pokemaster. How active will NPCs be in the game? What kind of roles can we expect them to take?
There are very few NPCs. They're going to be there. They can be interacted with. It will be obvious who they are. I would rather not say too much more about it than that, because it is kind of an important part of our game. But most of the game are going to just be PCs. There's actually very few NPCs.
When you write a good character and do that for everyone, it kind of runs itself. Like the PC is kind of
that's what we want. That's what we want.
Fantastic. Is there any opportunity? Some games do like specific plot requests or NPC requests or scene requests. If we have something like that that may require like an NPC or somebody other than a regular PC, how should we handle that, or how should we like communicate that?
If you come up with something that you really want to do, like let's say you want to have a seance where you want to call, your great Uncle Bob to come answer some questions, we are happy to run that scene as long as we have some time to do it and have the personnel to run it. Because we want to keep it as what you see is what you get. If we did not have in that example, if we didn't have somebody available to play an NPC at that time, what we might do instead is let the person run the scene, tell them ahead of, basically give them a write-up or a sheet or something, or just tell them ahead of time what they'll discover, and then let them run the scene, and, oh, great Uncle Bob didn't show up in person, but here's what he whispered in my ear from the spirit world. So we can run those player-driven scenes if they want, and we will do our best to make sure that they work well, but we can't always guarantee that we're going to have somebody available to play an NPC at that moment.
Yeah, and what about things like stuff I've done in the past that I may or may not do in other games in the future? Have ceremonies, have rituals, have prayers, sacrifices, stuff like that. And then, sometimes depending on the game, I'll go to the GM and I'll be like, just so you know, I sacrificed, 8 goats in the name of Thor, just in case Thor wants to show me any favor. Is that kind of thing encouraged? If I did something like that and role-played it super well, would that kind of, help me out?
Sure, absolutely. Anything that encourages role-play, we are going to reward. I mean, and I don't mean reward by, you get extra points, but if you do a seance, you lead a seance, and there's 8 people there, and, you pull out all the stops for that, and you tell us this is what we're trying to get or this is what we're trying to achieve, then as long as it doesn't, break our game in some way, then we're happy to work with you on that. For example, the time we ran it, we had somebody do this big ritual where he and this is a story we're not running with for this game, so I feel comfortable talking about it. We had a character who, like, this baby showed up, and nobody knew who the baby belonged to. It was left outside the door, and there was a note on the baby that said, I'm sorry I couldn't take care of it, here's your baby. And nobody knew who it was, and so somebody spent all this time casting this ritual where he could take his pipe and walk around the room and blow smoke onto people, and if they started coughing, it meant that they were the father. And so he just walked around the room, puffing on this pipe, not really smoking it, but puffing on it like he was. And if the person was, the father, then that person would start coughing. And when he told us what he was going to do, then I went to the person who was the father and said, if this person does this to you, this is your response.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. We have another clarification. If I say, for example, our group are leading a ritual to place a curse of spying on another faction, is that something you can work with, or do you want to keep it more like what you see is what you get?
It is, well, it's still what you see is what you get. It's also consent-based.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really important to remember that if you wanted to cast something that is, I'm going to spy on X faction, you still need to work with the people that you're spying on. Everything in this is going to be consent-based. So, for example, if I want to get into a duel with you, then I'm going to go to you and say, all right, let's have this duel, and I would like to win. The other person might say, well, I'd like to win, and they say, okay, well, let's have a compromise. Let's say I do this to you, I hit you with my special glove, and you accept my duel, and then, I punch you, and you punch me back, and then I fall out, okay? So there's still going to be that kind of consent that has to go on. Something like spying is a little more difficult to do, I approve that, but the thing you can do is you can just go spy on them. So if you are close enough and you can get away with it, that's still what you see is what you get.
Right, give it a try.
And they weren't careful enough to not get spied on. So the thing is, in character, this game is taking place at a hotel. Esoteric Institute is hosting it at the Le Pavillon Hotel in New Orleans. So what you see is what you get. So if you're in a group, you can't say, well, I'm actually in another room pretending to do so-and-so. No, you're there. Mm-hmm. You're right there. I can see you. And if I can get close enough and you don't get rid of me, I'm going to hear what you're saying.
Fantastic. Well, we have had a lot of really great questions, and I think my final takeaway is that, I have never seen a game like this before. For me, the setting is kind of new. It's, comfortable enough with stuff I've already done, but out there enough that it's, nothing like anything I've ever done before, and I cannot wait to play this game, and I'm so excited to be playing. I'm super honored to be playing, and I cannot wait to put the rest of my costume together and just get the full character sheet. And that's Strange Haven. That is a great comment. Secrets are only fun if other people learn about them.
Yes, absolutely.
That is so true.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Information sharing, if you can't do it in game and you're comfy doing that out of game, that's always great because other people can play on that if you want them to. Yeah. Absolutely great tip for the style.
On a lot of our character sheets, we have statements like, your motivation is to keep this thing secret. Well, that may be your in-character motivation, but your out-of-character motivation should be that at some point that secret comes out.
Absolutely.
Because otherwise, where's the drama?
Absolutely. Awesome. Playing to lose, causing drama in-game, that's what it's all about. Everyone seems to kind of really have the hang of that, so I can't wait. If anybody has, if anyone's new or has any, specific questions about the style or costuming or anything, the Facebook group is the place to be. Because even though everyone's pretty busy, There's always somebody that will like respond to you right away, especially with questions about costuming. I've asked for a lot of help on costuming, questions on play style, stuff like that. So please don't be shy. Totally use those Facebook groups and ask. Connect with people in your faction. Like, I know everyone in my faction, we're so excited and we want to like go forward, but we're like, well, we need to get the detailed character sheet yet. So I'm so excited that those are coming in like a week or two. I can't wait. Yeah, like the hype is very real at this point. The hype is very real. So thank you so much, Kathy, for your time. And I posted the website a couple times in the chat here, and I'm going to do so again right now so that you can go to it and sign up. And there we go. Ta-da! So there you go. So if you want more information about the game, that's where you can go to sign up. And again, once you're in the Facebook group, there's just like no shortage of people who will help and ask questions and everything like that. And thank you so much for the staff also who came in and helped us field questions. We had more questions than we could cover, so I'm really glad that some of the other writers and some of your team members were in there. That's a really great indication that this game is going to be run really well and that everybody is just so well supported as a player. That makes me feel great about going. So Kathy, thank you so much, and I will talk to you soon.
All right, thank you, Tara.
All right, everyone, thank you so much for joining us, and have a great evening.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.